Everyone. Well, welcome to our second podcast episode. So, the Michelle podcast. Today, we are shedding light on Filipino VA culture. And today, I do have Sugar Batonga in this podcast, and she's probably the perfect person to talk about the Filipino culture as well as how it differs and same as the American culture here. So, just a little background. I want to introduce Sugar. She has over 20 years of experience in the BPO and vendor management industry. She moved to the US in 2015 from the Philippines and finished her MBA in San Francisco in 2016. She's also managed global operations to successfully implement new programs, the functions from the ground up, and ensure long-term sustainability of business operations. She has led both startups and established companies through the years of growth and transformation. Sugar is currently the SVP of operations at DME, which is a BPO call center company headquartered in the Philippines. They have an office here, but they also have a huge employee base of call center agents in the Philippines. And they have about 900 employees. So it's a pretty large presence there. She's currently married and lives in Ohio with her family. So welcome, Sugar.
Hi everyone. Thank you for inviting me
Of
to
course.
hear this.
Yeah, no, and as I was talking to Rich Lee, who is the CEO president over at DME, as I was talking to him about a podcast, he was like, the perfect person would be to talk with you, Sugar. So I was like, let's talk about it. And I think just your passion to support women and, providing opportunities for them in the Philippines, I think it perfectly aligns with just our mission. So that's part of the reason why I wanted to explore that a little bit further.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm happy to discuss. Thank you,
Yeah.
Rich, if you're listening to
Shout
this.
out to Rich. Thank you for connecting us. So maybe let's start off with your beginning story when you came to the US. Maybe tell us a little bit about when you moved here. What are some of the challenges, similarities, maybe things that you felt were new to you when you moved here from the Philippines, and how did that kind of shape your professional experience, your professional journey?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Gosh, moving to the US was a bit of a culture shock. I had to adjust a whole new way of doing things like communication, expectations, everything. I remember even just like there were months when I had to, mentally convert pesos to dollars. Like, oh, this is a $6 meal. This should last me 2 days. Like I always had to do that. So it was really a huge adjustment for me. The workplace dynamics were also so different from what I was used to. But looking back, those challenges were actually the best thing that could have happened. They taught me how to be flexible, adapting quickly, which has been a huge asset in my career. So, yeah, the hurdles, the personal growth that I had during the MBA, and even just first step in the US, it really pushed me to grow and learn to embrace change, which definitely helped me to thrive such in a very fast-paced industry like a BPO.
Yeah. Well, and not everybody moves to a different country. So I give it to you. I mean, it takes courage, and it's not easy. You have to, I mean, what I know about the Filipino culture is most people learn English. So it's not like you're completely thrown in here and you have no background speaking English. So that was it's probably a little bit easier for you moving here. But there is a cultural norm, right? Or cultural difference. And just having to learn the pace of life, it is fast here. Things are a little bit, they call it bahalana, right?
Yeah.
And more like laid back. You can define it. What does bahala mean? Bahalana mean?
Bahala na, it's like in the Philippines, it's like bahala na si Batman. It's really more just let you just have to do whatever you do and let the fate or decides what it's gonna happen, like things like that.
It's a running joke here because my husband's Filipino. So, whenever we talk about just go with the flow, we're late or whatnot, he'd be like,
Sure,
bahala na.
that's true.
So we definitely use it here. But the other thing you mentioned was just converting pesos to dollars. Like that can be a challenge, right? Because you don't know how much meals cost and
Mm.
or how much something should cost, and so you're constantly making those conversions. But I know that a lot of Filipinos get paid US dollars, and so some of them are paid in pesos, some of them are paid in US dollars. So it's kind of a normal currency. Is that correct?
Yeah. Um, right. So when I was like working in a call center industry as well in the Philippines, we were paid in pesos, and that's what I was just used to growing up. So when I moved to the US, I had a little bit of, difficulty in adjusting until such time a co-Filipino also told me, you know what, you're you're not gonna live freely if you continue to have that type of mindset. You gotta adjust with your environment. Now you have a dollar salary. You need to be able to really, you know, do better when it comes to that side. So that's really very important. Like some advice of your network, your community, and how to handle all of these changes. So that was really one of the key points that made me not really successful, but at least be able to go through the changes a little bit easier because I had to go to where the community is, like all the student community, all the Filipino community, anything that you could get your hands on in order to learn from them.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, seems like it's really important to find a community and people that you can be around to learn from. I'm kind of curious, like, how did you get your start in the BPO industry?
Yeah. A lot of people would say like maybe it's by accident, but in my case, like way before I graduated college, that was always my goal. And I know that a lot of college nowadays in the Philippines, they also have like a call center academy. So people are really going to school or taking courses to be good at this industry. So I immediately know that that is one aspect that I would like to do. And at that time, in my small island, which is Cebu, we only had like maybe a couple of BPOs. It was just flourishing. It was just very new back then. And it really, made me interested because it's servicing the US, it's servicing global audiences. And I'm always interested of seeing where my talent is compared to, tapping the global market, things like that. So yeah, I immediately after graduation, I applied to all call centers I knew and got the job from there.
Awesome. You mentioned, you told me the story, just kind of talking about the Filipino landscape or the BPO landscape. You mentioned that for Filipinos, I mean, they all attend college, or it sounds, I mean, maybe you can kind of clarify with me, but they, after college, it's seen as a prestigious opportunity to get a job at a call center or as a virtual assistant. Is that correct?
Yeah, no, that's correct. I think, okay, generally speaking, I know we have a lot of audience here, is that we know that Philippines is a third world country, and any job you could get your hands on to put money on the table, that's really, something to be admired for. But not everyone can get to a call center industry or a BPO or a VA industry, mainly because like if you service the US market or even Europe or whatever region would that be, there's like a higher standard. They have education technology that don't exist in the Philippines. So you have to be able to get yourselves upskilled to that. So people always, and I don't know with the other countries, but in Philippines, it's looked up to when you work in that industry because that means that you're able to be, head to head with all of these other countries with the skill set that you have.
It's kind of like in the US, the prestigious titles are usually an engineer or a doctor or a lawyer. So I feel like it's kind of likened to if you're Filipino and you're able to get into a call center or as a virtual assistant, it's like people going through med school or law school and getting a really, really prestigious job here. So it's kind of an interesting similarity there, but it's also good to know that, people really do take their jobs seriously. And it sounds like people wouldn't leave. Like once they get something and it's a prestigious opportunity, they wouldn't just leave or jump ship. They would be pretty loyal to taking on that role. And most people stay in the role for years, or what does the kind of that trend look like?
Gosh, I think, the previous when I was in the Philippines, I mean, I stayed with my company 10 years and I only moved out mainly because I needed to, move to a different country. But a lot of my friends, a lot of people there really stayed long to a certain company. And I think it's BPO, it's also a known fact that that is also one of the bread and butter of the Philippine economy. So they really pay well. Of course, those other jobs that you mentioned, like, being doctors, those are prestigious, but not everyone in Philippines can get education for that type or licenses for that one. But in Philippines, because there's a lot of more westernized televisions, you can speak, the language quite well, then you can have, a better salary after that. So yeah. But no, as far as loyalty is concerned, you will be able to have that in a BPO industry. And that's, I believe, one of the reasons as to why it's a big deal for BPO companies to have a great place to work certification, because they know it can be a revolving door sometimes. But if and when you have the right culture, like any other companies, people would stay. I mean, why wouldn't they stay if they knew that they are valued by the company and they're paid well?
Yeah, so you mentioned you mentioned that you were at your previous company for 10 years before you had to move. What's generally the time that people stay? Like what's the average tenure for people who join the BPO and stay with the company?
Oh,
Putting you on the
you know
spot
what?
there.
Yeah, no, that's fine because I feel like I feel like my generation has a longer tenure, but at the same time, the people younger, like they are looking for something and are really setting the bar higher when it comes to what the expectations are on what the company can provide them for, and you see a little bit of lower tenure that, but that also really bringing up the standards, and that means that as an employer, you need to be able to think ways differently, and you need to be able to really, manage any differences of these generations. So I don't know. I feel like our agents have an average tenure of 4 years before they move because we do cater like during the hiring process. We wanted to have agents who have already experience with the role we're looking for. And that also really matters to us, like the differences of, companies that they've gone through. And that's one thing that we've noticed, like, okay, they have an average of 3 years or 4 years tenure in a company.
Yeah. So it sounds like, I mean, 3 to 4 years is a pretty good tenure. In some, and I mean, you said that this generation, 3 to 4 years in the US, our average tenure is probably 2 to 3 years, if that best. There are some roles that in sales, people, it's a revolving door. Like they will jump usually within a year. And so we see a lot of short tenures here, but 3 to 4 years is pretty good there. And it sounds like, I mean, I've seen candidates, Filipino candidates that have been at companies for a lot longer. Sometimes they are there for 6 to 8 years, and that's normal, and so I definitely see the loyalty there. Mm.
Yeah.
Maybe tell me a little bit. So you mentioned kind of the BPO, and I'm kind of curious to hear because I know that BME, maybe for everybody, what does BPO stand for? Maybe we kind of set the stage there.
Business process outsourcing. So it's really about giving your services instead of, so as a corporate, as a company, you have a lot of things to worry about, the strategic decisions that you have to make, managing the day-to-day operations, which can be really tiring and, getting your hands dirty. So a lot of US companies have thought of like having a cost-friendlier type of service, but, outsourcing this type of roles and at the same time giving them freedom and and flexibility to just really focus on the bigger roles like the strategic planning or making decisions about business development, things like that, to leave the day to BPO companies.
Yeah. I mean, there's such value in having a call center or hiring a
Absolutely.
BPO or VA firm because there's a lot of administrative work that a lot of Filipinos are pretty skilled in. That's one of the things that it was really surprising as I started to learn more about the VA industry is that Filipinos are really skilled and they have been trained, they have gone to school, they have education, and they can figure things out. So that was one of the things that, I noticed. I was kind of curious. I mean, in terms of what's what are some of the misconceptions that clients may have about Filipinos? And, what are things that you've realized? Yeah, maybe we'll start with kind of what are the common misconceptions?
I feel like the common misconception is really thinking that outsourcing or Filipino in general can only do the how do you call that, a very simple task, scheduling, appointment setting, things like that, but which we can do very well, but we can do so much more complex tasks, more that really requires a lot of leadership and decision making. So those type of roles can definitely be outsourced to Filipinos as well. Like what you mentioned, the education level of
Mhm.
Filipinos are really quite up there and can do the task of, as well as what other people in the different countries can do. So those can be outsourced as well. You just really have to provide the right, like for example, like what type of profile you're looking for, and you can find someone. It's funny because I just had a client. We're not gonna name the client definitely, and they're looking for someone that can speak Korean, working at a night shift in the Philippines, and because they couldn't look, for one in the U.S. with the right level of, cost. And just in one day of posting that, we've had 30 applicants, and a lot of them, more than 50%, are way can do the job really good. So that's the level of hiring and, you know, workforce that you're seeing in the Philippines.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty amazing. So those Filipinos were able to learn, like they know how to speak Korean.
Yes.
That's
Yes. It's like a melting pot of everything because, it's composed of a lot of islands, and there's a lot of, tourism is also one really big thing in the US, in the
mm,
Philippines, I mean, which is another um one thing that boosts the economy of the country. So there's a lot of things to learn, a lot of mix transferable skill set that they were able to gather of all these experiences.
it's interesting. I mean, just learning that because tourism is such a big deal, you have a lot of people who can speak multiple languages, and that's why I mean English is definitely the second, and I think you might have said even like it's starting to become a first. It's a dominant
Yes.
language in the Philippines. So almost everybody speaks English and they understand. So they're highly advanced, or at least they have really good English. The other piece is that they're also very multilingual. And that's actually really interesting for some of these companies that trying to find somebody who's multilingual here in the US or in Europe. And, lo and behold, you have people in the Philippines who can speak Spanish or other languages and
So
and
true.
then they're educated. I guess do most Filipinos attend a university?
I don't have a percentage in mind, but I do know that that's really, I guess, like on my personal experience, you know, my parents, elementary to high school, you like we went to a public school, but on college, you really have to work harder to get your children to a private school because you know that that's going to matter when she applies or he applies for a job. I know that the people in Philippines, they do their best to get that type of education as well, or any, but I'm just I know that that is something that's really up there as well. However, having said that, a lot of, especially the Gen Zers now are know that education and knowledge can just be achieved anywhere and not just in school. And because they were educated well by their parents and even a lot of social media telling them about the Western side of the culture or whatever culture they're interested about, they also, find ways how to alleviate themselves and get themselves, different skill set that gives them more network.
Yeah. So, Sugar, you did mention that Filipinos do really complex tasks, and I want to kind of dig into that a little bit further. What are some examples of complex tasks that they can do?
I think we've seen a lot of Filipinos out there that have proven themselves when it comes to not just the business side, but the financial, even on sciences, bio, like healthcare industries. You see them so much on all of those different ones. So they're not just really the ones who are, sitting in and taking phone calls day in and day out. I mean, these is a very phenomenal job and in that they can do well. But even those people that are really making hardcore decisions that could affect a lot of people, either coming from a leadership, being a leader in the company, or, being able to also still employ themselves once they get to the U.S. Part of the government offices. So yeah.
No, I've said I kind of to add it to that. I've seen, some of the complex tasks that I've seen are, you were talking about how a lot of misconceptions are that Filipinos only do kind of low level data entry. And that was my misconception before I started hiring in the Philippines. And after I started working and interviewing with more Filipinos, I realized there's a whole bunch of tasks that Filipinos can really do. And, that includes social media management, creating graphics, editing videos, posting and responding comments. There's also I mean, some of the Filipinos I know manage finance. You were talking about that, like bookkeeping. So they're doing some complex tasks within QuickBooks and managing CRMs like Salesforce or HubSpot. So there are pretty complex tasks that they're able to do on top of doing sales calls. So there's a lot of customer support, call centers. Some of them have really good English to the point that I can't tell they live in the Philippines and they do cold calls. They do cold calls on behalf of the companies here and you can't tell. So I've been amazed with just the level of skills, but as well as just the level of educated, really, really just high kind of American English speaking Filipinos. So, that's part of why, having you on this podcast was just kind of go through we've seen and what are some of the misconceptions and what are, what are we doing kind of moving forward? So, um, so what are some of the things that DME, the company that you work for, what are some of the things that you've done to attract really great talent in the Philippines?
So I think immediately recognizing that in order for you to be successful, you have to be able to buy out these talents. We knew that the people that we're looking for not only had the right behavior, that means they have their loyalty with them, that means they have their, hard work and grit. We wanted to be able to really pay and buy them out. Essentially, that means you have to be able to pay them what they're really worth for. So we did a lot of study in order for us to recognize that. We need to not just see what's currently being given in the market. That's one of the things that we have seen right away. Like BPOs, they somehow, have the same price range when it comes to the salary. And we wanted to be able to see like, hey, let's take a step back with this level of skill that we're looking for. Is that really just the price range or is that something that we can still do more? And that's really one of the things that we did, being able to recognize the talent and being able to really associate that with what it's really the cost, or I mean the price range of that talent and the skill set. The second one is once you are able to attract those top talents, they don't really stay on if the culture is not there as well. So they need, because they are top talents, these are the people that eyeing for promotions, or these are the people that are expecting a lot more coming from you as an employer. And that's one of the most, really, I believe, most beautiful thing of being able to work with leaders, because these are the top talents that you're getting. So these are essentially already leaders. So building a culture of being able to be transparent to all of them on what the challenges are and letting them be involved in that solution was a very crucial part, or a crucial key for them to stay longer in the company, for them to feel that they are part of something bigger and really see the changes as things go through because of their suggestions. So
Yeah. So it sounds like, I mean, the ways that you, DME and the company has really attracted Filipino talent is really, and you mentioned paying above market rates. So I do know that you guys have excellent benefits, PTO, you work from home. I mean, a lot of BPOs are in office. And one thing we didn't mention is that commuting is such a big deal there because a lot of people, you mentioned the average commute is about 2 hours.
yeah,
We
absolutely.
didn't
Thank
talk
you for
about
the
that.
reminder. That is really one of the top things that out there. Really being able to provide that balance to the team. And we know that they wanted to also spend a lot of time with their family. So that's the reason why the full remote work setup was really, implemented, because we would like them to be able to work with a top pay and at the same time, not lose that hours. Because you're right, like sometimes our agents from where they live, it would have to take like 2 to 3 hours one-way commute just to get to the office, and that's just painful.
That's really, really painful because, in the US, I would say most people don't, they complain about, commuting 30, 45 minutes, sometimes an hour, but we don't do that anymore because of remote work. I'm looking at, we're complaining about this, but then Filipinos are on average are saying 2 to 3 hours, and that I've seen as common. And a lot of them are working parents, like they're working moms or dads that can't leave the house. And that is one, so that's the reason one of our missions here is to provide remote opportunities for a lot of Filipinos because, some people I've heard they have disabled children that they can't leave the house. So providing an opportunity where you can feed and get paid, but also feed and put food on the table for your family, but also be able to watch them and spend time with them and not have to waste, well, it'd be what, 4 to 6 hours a day in commuting. So it's yeah, it's a great opportunity to be able to do that. And so the second thing I heard you say was DME has been really good about providing a culture where people feel like they're heard and supported. So that's something that a lot of employers, if you're thinking about outsourcing to the Philippines, making sure that of course, you're paying above market rate, have a really good support system or an environment where they feel heard. Then just, I want to recap, what was the third thing, or was there a third thing that you had mentioned?
The remote work setup.
It was a remote work setup. So that it sounds like those are the three major big things that are important for workers and
Right.
things that we can implement as an employer. The firm that you're working with and you're just hired directly, that's something that you can implement.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. So I want to kind of dive into a little bit more of just what would you say? So all the people who are new, all the listeners that are new to this, what would you say? Could you describe what are the key cultural traits that are common among Filipino VAs that an employer should be aware of when they're working with them?
I think the first one is really adaptability. I think, mainly because these people already, since VA and BPO is a very big thing in the Philippines, you most likely would hire someone that already have done whatever you're looking for, and have experiences. Like, for example, even if you're going to hire, someone with a sales experience, but that person with a sales experience, hey, also has a billing experience. So there's a lot of that talent. being able to get a lot of transferable skills. So that's the first, right off the bat that I could think of. And second is really more of, I would say, communication. You just have to employ the right approach. Quite honestly, I think with a lot of, the new generation, they're more transparent and they're more, being very direct with what they're looking for. They appreciate expectations. They appreciate, you just telling them what it is. But there's also some generation that is really putting the client on a pedestal right away, and they tend to be more shy and reserved about their thoughts. That's why there's like a lot of techniques that you need to employ in order to get something out from those type of people. So, but at the same time, regardless, the type of individuals, if you're able to employ the right technique, people have a lot of insights that they can, advise you, and not just on how they can do the job better, but even those people who can see the entire business overall from end to end can give you insights on how to improve the business overall as well.
Yeah, so it sounds like in terms of the key cultural traits that are common among Filipinos, it is adaptability. So we talked about just having their ability to take sales skills and move it into customer support or other skills. So having somebody who can wear multiple hats is important, and especially for a small company or startup, it's critical. And someone can plug and play and just take on different hats. It's amazing. The other piece you were talking about was just communication. Like they will over communicate, or at least be communicative about what they're looking for and what's important for them. I do know that part of the culture, there is some shyness and being reserved. And so for new employers, just being kind of aware of that. Sometimes prompting, talking and over communicating with your Filipino worker is, how's things going? What are the positives? What are the negatives? What can we work on? Any questions? And sometimes you get really good ideas that come out of that. It sounds like communication
Absolutely.
is a big thing.
Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons as to why, the executive team at DME, they really go to and meet these people, our agents in person like twice a year, and being able to do activities with them that has nothing to do with work, just being able to show appreciation, going out with them and talking to them, not about work totally, and being able to remember like, hey, how's your dad, and with a name and all of that. So as soon as you get to do that, a lot of times people would then feel like, okay, I can not have my guards up, so much with this type of executive team, because they do care about me. They remember my brother's name, my sister's name, they remember my school. So that's the reason why you need to be able to have that level of relationship, and then you can just really, I'm astonished and I'm really amazed with the level of ideas that we're getting coming from these agents. Remember, these agents did not just work for you, they work with several other established companies, and they're getting a lot of these ideas. So that's just, amazing.
Yeah. Well, it's great. It sounds like DMA has really cultivated a culture of being open, getting to know your employees. And so your employees in turn become loyal, and they probably work really hard. They understand that you guys take care of them. And so they also come up with ideas, maybe ways to do better ways to do better in terms of whether it's process or things they're seeing or gaps in the market, and they're pointing it out, which is great. And I think a lot of companies could really use that. So Sugar, I have a question in terms of how, because, for people who are new to this, in terms of hiring or working with a VA or call center agent, how is the Filipino culture similar, and how is it different from the US culture?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for the similarities, the first one I could think of is um, teamwork and collaboration. I think that's very common in both countries. I see a strong emphasis of being able to work together. There's always a shared understanding that success is driven by, generally working well with the teams when it comes to brainstorming or working in a project or troubleshooting issues together. The second similarity I can think of is more on being professional and respectful in the work environment, like treating the colleagues with respect, being punctual, courteous, especially in a work or office setting, just maintaining a professional demeanor. The differences is like what I mentioned earlier, the communication style really, because in the US, communication tends to be more direct and straightforward. Um, I've seen a lot of people like just freely giving feedback very openly, even if it's, especially if it's critical feedback. In contrast, in Philippines, we have gotten better, like what I said, but there's still that gap. Communication is more often indirect and polite, with a greater focus on maintaining a harmony, within the people you work with. So they avoid a little bit of confrontation and they sometimes soften feedback. You know what I mean? Just to preserve that relationship.
I've seen that kind of, just to kind of recap. So it sounds like, I mean, in terms of the similarities, like kind of the working style, working collaboratively together and working through solutions and coming up with ideas. So there's that similarity. In terms of just the differences, I've seen the cultural difference. Americans tend to be definitely more direct and straightforward, and here's your constructive criticism, and let's talk about this and let's work on it. Whereas Filipinos tend to be a little bit more, I would say, reserved or quiet or shy, being very direct, and especially if it's a negative feedback or something that they feel like they might get in trouble with, they're less likely to approach and say something. And so, I think the best avenue, what I've seen, is just keeping an open communication and constantly having a way where employees or a VA or call center agent has a channel to express how they feel and not get penalized for it. It's like, hey, I appreciate you sharing that negative feedback. This is great, and we can work on that. Because I know sometimes it's, you want to create that harmony is really important. Because I know that Filipinos tend to be very community driven. And so you want to keep the harmony and you don't want to say anything that rocks the boat. So I don't know if there's anything else you want to add to that, but I totally get what you're talking about there.
Yeah, I think one of the things right away that I've also seen is the difference is that even while I was schooling, in the US, there's always a stronger emphasis in, having that work-life balance. Not that Filipinos don't do that. I think with a lot of, Western ideas coming to the country, it's now there, we are now more sensitive to work-life balance. In fact, that's always one of the top items in any, employee satisfaction survey. But generally speaking, sometimes in the Philippines, there's a tendency, to be, how do you call that, more flexible with the work hours. They sometimes sacrifice personal time to ensure tasks are completed. They don't mind overtime, things like that as much. So uh, that's one of the things that I've seen as a difference as well.
Yeah, I know that Filipinos tend to be very flexible, and that's why a lot of them are very open to graveyard shift, midday shifts, aside from just day shifts. They also, again, they'll commute and they'll work overtime or on weekends just to complete something. So there's that flexibility, which is great. I think sometimes, we do work-life balance here in America because it's important to have the balance.
Yeah.
At the same time, sometimes if a company is still, it's a small mom and pop shop that's open on Saturdays, you need somebody, or a call center that you need to support customers on a Saturday or weekend. It's important to have that flexibility. So, Sugar, this kind of wraps up all the questions. I really appreciate your time today. And kind of the last piece is, how do people find you? What are ways, if I don't know if there's ways for them to contact you, or if they have any questions about DME, what's a good way for them to contact you?
Yeah. Currently, I don't have any social media, but I do have LinkedIn. I think that's still a social media. So you can just find me in LinkedIn. Yeah.
we could put it in the show notes, so we can always put your LinkedIn. And if just kind of a last note on here, if you as a listener are looking to learn more about VAs and how that can help grow your business, please reach out to us at Jump Search VA or me, Michelle Quill. If you're looking for call center agents or BPO to help with kind of outsourcing your business process and having call center support, contact Sugar at DME. And I do encourage all the listeners to share the episode, subscribe to our podcast, and leave a review, especially if you found this to be helpful. So thank you for your time, Sugar. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Michelle.